When I was just starting to get into video games, it seemed like every other game I played had some interest in allowing for a certain amount of choice, even if it was just choosing dialogue that was either labeled good or evil. I remember some older ones that I can't quite remember the name of, where your power set and endings would change based on your actions. Think of something like Mass Effect or Dishonored or Bioshock. And while I would really love to dive into those games and explore how choices affected how you played, what I really want to focus on are visual novels. For the most part, choice in visual novels is the game mechanic. Otherwise, you're just reading a story told with visuals, music, and often voice acting. They also tend to be harem, but we'll get to that later and maybe explore it more at a later date. The reason I wanted to reflect is because I started playing Chaos Head Noah, a game I played the sequel to before I played this one, the sequel being Chaos Child. In my defense, Chaos Child came out on Steam first, so it was legally found first. As I got ready to read it, I realized I started to think about how I would go about playing the visual novel. And you know what? Any visual novel in general. That is, I usually start the game, get to the first option, and then go find a walkthrough. Since I played Chaos Child, I was sure I was going to be using a walkthrough, as that visual novel has endings where you're supposed to get them in a certain order. And if I didn't want to be fast forwarding through a lot of text, I was going to follow that walkthrough and it was mandatory. The fast forward button is something that is built into most visual novels. Hell, it's built into Higurashi, and that series has no choices in it and is just a story told with a different medium and, visuals and music. Still, most visual novels get more use out of their fast forward button. If you're lucky, the visual novel will give you a little graph where choices branches off, and you can go right to the moment and make the other choice once you go back to play it and try and get a different ending. Most visual novels, however, try to keep up the immersion, and at most will gray out the choice you already made so that you can make it at another time. That does mean that when going into visual novels, you either need to really like rereading the same scenes over and over again, as the choices only lead to slightly different dialogue or a special scene, or anything that isn't the ending, where the ending will be the biggest difference. Or you need to not mind skipping a lot of information as you get to the part you really want to read. For harem novels like Love or Fruit of Grisha, no, I didn't say either of those right, it takes until the very end of the visual novel before the story really breaks off into its own different path. This would be because at one point you have chosen your girl, and now you are going to be pursuing her and getting her good or bad ending. Then you have to go back and choose all those choices again, but this time for a different girl. The most play sort of game mechanic of this is that you can usually, in most VNs, get a bunch of bad endings, or neutral endings that are usually the most boring of all of the endings. I played a game called Root Double, where you died a whole hell of a lot in a lot of fascinating ways. But the thing about it is, there was supposed to be a point where you actually got to a true bad end. Like, you didn't just die. You actually played the game to a point where you got oh, you made so many bad choices, this is how your character dies. The problem was I had made so many bad choices that I got soft blocked into a place where it's like, no, you're just going to get a you died part. You're not even going to be able to get to the bad ending. You have soft blocked yourself into dying right here, no more, do not pass go. At which point I did go get a walkthrough because it had already been like a few hours into that the end, and I was not going to just keep going and soft blocking myself. Oh my god. Because here's the thing, I'm going to be honest, I do not want to reread or skip over most of the visual novels after I've read it the first time. I find that boring and repetitive. The only reason I kept going with Root Double is because the endings were fast, you just died, and as I said, once it got to a point where I couldn't move forward, I'm like, okay, walk through. Now, to be truthful, most visual novels will try to make it worth your while to reread them or give you a reason to want to go through the skip button to get to the good bits. That is because they want to engage you and keep you on that reading as long as they can. The problem is some games try to trap you into reading by being boring and not actually going through with what they need. What I mean is that while some games like Raging Loop have you sort of streamlined into a storyline and all the endings are interesting, other games will be cheap about it and annoying, like our world is ended. And let me rant for a moment because oh my god, do I resent the hell out of what Our World is Ended did. Because while many visual novels manipulate you to get all the endings in order to get the true ending, this one I think was the most egregious to me. In some ways, Our World Is Ended actually reminds me of Chaos Head Noah. Hold on for a second. The reason I'm doing that is because the first time you go through Chaos Head Noah, that first playthrough, it doesn't matter what your choices are. There's only one spot where you can get a bad end. But no matter what, if you get through that part, you are going to get the normal ending. The only reason I did not drop Chaos Head Noah is because I have read Chaos Head Child, and Chaos Head Child did really, really interesting things with its endings. And I'm kind of banking on Chaos Head Noah at least doing something almost that interesting. Our World Is Ended, it does nothing interesting with its endings. It just goes, okay, first time you get normal ending, and then the next times you can get all the interesting endings where you romance or get connected to the characters in the story. No, thank you. What I really like, if you're going to have multiple endings going for this, is if you're playing with the meta of the fact that there are multiple routes. The most popular probably being Doki Doki Literature Club, followed up by You, Me, and Her. Like, when I think you think of meta and multiple endings and going through the day over and over again, you go through Doki Doki Literature Club if you're thinking about visual novels. But the thing is, it does it so well because nothing really feels repetitive, even if some lines come up more than once. Also, that game is ridiculously short, and going through those different ones takes no time whatsoever, so it really doesn't feel like it's trying to waste your time. But other visual novels have interesting ways of doing this too. Raging Loop and Letters have a graph that you can work from. Though Raging Loops is kind of hilarious because it is basically a linear experience that pretends to have a lot of choices that branch out. Then there's No Thank You, a game I would not actually recommend anyone playing. Had a big revelation at the end of whatever ending you got first. And then when you replayed trying to get other characters that would contextualize what you were reading and actually added text to the story, which made the story and the dialogue feel fresh, even as in the beginning you were going through basically the same motions of working at the bar as you had at the beginning of the first playthrough. Then there are some games that I don't mind as much, them going over the same thing over and over again, basically, because they are short and exploratory in a way that makes it feel worth it. We Know the Devil has you playing again and again the exact same day, and even has a true ending that you have to get after you get all the other endings. But also, I got all those endings in under 3 hours, so the bit that did get repeated over and over again every playthrough felt worth it. Had a Full Boyfriend makes you get the endings for every possible pigeon boyfriend before you can get to the real meat of the story. And the concept for that was novel enough that even though I put 8 hours into it, and that was the total amount, the game didn't feel like a waste of time. Still, sometimes I wish I could just read the story in a non-repeating fashion. I get that the choices are supposed to make visual novels feel more game-like, either by creating bad endings with poor or random choices, or by making it a choose-your-own-adventure or choose-your-own-love interest sort of story. But I often just want the story. I don't want any choices, and I just want to read. Like in Higurashi, where the hard part of the story is not making choices, because there are none, but in putting the mystery together to figure out what's going on. Or like Umaneko, where the only choices you make are in the last chapter, where the author wanted you to answer some riddles because he really likes riddles, and answering correctly gets you an achievement. Don't get me wrong, I get why most visual novels have choice beyond it just being a staple in the genre. I even get why sometimes you have to play the game several times to get the true ending. But some of the weakest parts of some visual novels is also you having to read the same thing over and over and over again with just those slight changes based on your choices. Obviously, if there is a true ending hidden behind getting like 6 other endings, I tend to lose interest real fast. Though I have to say, harem and anime ones are the ones that annoy me the most because those will lock characters behind a you have to get all the rest of the girls before you can get the one you want, and I do not want to do the lolly route, no thank you! Anyways, those are just my thoughts for now. I'm kind of interested in continuing to explore more with visual novels and games, but I'm also interested in whatever anyone else wants me to review or play visual novel-wise. Right now I'm thinking of maybe making one about what a visual novel is, maybe make comparisons between different types of visual novels, maybe take a deeper look into the realities of how games such as Bioshock Infinite and the Nonary games have explored different world ideas. Anyways, see you then. Right now I'm gonna go play Dollhouse of Offerings. No spoilers.